Hello and thanks for tuning in to Compass Media. I'm Finbar Markey. As the government in Dublin plans and schemes around its upcoming COVID inquiry, which no doubt will end up an exercise in self-congratulations, several small numbers of councillors in Cork have put a motion down to the council in Cork requesting that their local authority send a letter to the government demanding an in-depth investigation into the response to COVID, but also and most importantly to ongoing excess deaths in Ireland. I'm joined by the councillor in Cork who put that motion down, Peter O'Donoghue, who's going to have a chat to us about what the motion is about, the results, and let me tell you straight off so you won't be disappointed, it was a complete flop. Most of the councillors didn't want to know, and we'll talk about why that is. And Peter also wants to just talk to people who are viewing this programme about what they can do by encouraging their own local councillors to put down a similar motion in their own local authority, wherever they live. Thanks for joining us today, Peter.
You're very welcome, Finbar.
That was a bit of that was
keeping well in Dundalk.
Oh, I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best. Now, I hope you're not doxing me or voxing me or whatever that is. You know, when you go online and you tell people where to live and stuff like that. I'm sure you're not. I'm sure most viewers know from my accent that I'm in County Loud somewhere. Peter, first of all, how are you doing? How's Cork doing?
Good, Finbar. Considering we're doing good here at the moment, yes.
That's good. That's good. Peter, you put down a motion and I described it as a complete flop, but I don't think the floppiness of it was a reflection on you, but rather a reflection on the majority of members of Cork County Council. Could you give us a bit of background to that motion, why you put it down, what your concerns are, and what the results of that motion what is and was and is, and maybe what kind of support you got as well, because you got a little bit of support too.
Yeah, well, I suppose, first of all, Finbar, before I start, it doesn't surprise me that it was a flop, bearing in mind that the vast majority of the councillors within Cork County Council are from the political parties, and almost every political party supported wholeheartedly the COVID restrictions and the COVID lockdowns. So it doesn't surprise me that it was a flop. But look, the basis of my motion was that roughly this time 5 years ago, we had, I suppose, the introduction of the COVID restrictions and lockdowns, which are probably the most authoritarian measure ever taken by any government in the history of the Irish state. And I suppose, like 5 years later, we still have had no real inquiry into that. We still have had no evaluation or review of those measures which were taking place to see what we potentially could do better in the future if such a disease or something was to hit our country again. So that was why I brought forward the motion. I thought, look, 5 years has passed now. We need an inquiry, and we need to put as much pressure on to have that inquiry. So my motion, the wording of my motion was that considering it is 5 years since the introduction of the COVID lockdowns, Cork County Council would write to the Taoiseach and requested a fully transparent, independent public inquiry into the previous government's reaction to the COVID-19 virus be held within the coming 3 months, and that this inquiry would also investigate the causes of the major increase in excess deaths in the last 3 years, and if these deaths are linked to the COVID restrictions. So that was another part of my motion. The stats now are showing that there's 22,000 plus people in this country have died more than would have been expected to die. And we need an investigation into that. So I was also asking that question as well.
So before we even look at the results, to my mind, what you've just said there, which is the content of your motion, totally neutral. You're not accusing anybody of anything. You're not saying anything was done right or wrong. You're just looking for a transparent and independent investigation. What response did you get?
Oh, my motion went down like a lead balloon, Finbar. It was probably the most heated and most uneasy I've ever seen any councillors in that chamber. There was huge resistance to my motion. Straight away, the other councillors, they didn't talk about the wording of my motion. They, I suppose, alluded to COVID and how dangerous it was and how their friends passed away and relations passed away, and I was accused of making a political football out of the issue. I was accused of, creating fear and anxiety and it was nearly complete opposition to the motion. But I reiterated again, this is the wording of my motion. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm not blaming anyone of anything. I'm just asking that we have a fully transparent, public, independent inquiry into our previous government's reaction to the COVID-19 virus. And within that inquiry, we investigate the increase in sudden deaths.
So the response that you got, bottom line, was you were told that you were just looking for attention, basically, that there was nothing serious behind this. And yet, when you do look at these excess deaths, we all know people, young people, middle-aged people, who, and at a far greater rate since COVID, are dying. We know these people ourselves in our own community. So sometimes we go to the funerals. We have our suspicions. We don't necessarily say what we think, but many of us think to ourselves, the vaccine, But this program's not saying it is or it isn't. But what the question has to be asked, though, of those mass majority of councillors in Cork, and if it's put to the test in other local areas, possibly most councillors in the country, the question has to be asked: are you not concerned enough at these debts, these excess debts, to just have it looked into? Not talking about blame, not talking, just having it looked into for proper scientific reasons because you care about your community. But it seems to me that, and this is only on the face of it, it seems to me that they're protecting themselves and their own response, because you, through your motion, you're basically asking the watchman to have an investigation on his own watch. And that's highly unlikely, isn't it?
Yeah. And look, unfortunately, we've always had debt. Debt is a part of life, unfortunately. And we've always had young people passing away. My own brother passed away before 2020, before the restrictions, with cancer. But what I'm pointing out is that the rate of death has increased dramatically, and it's off the charts. In 2020, we had approximately 15 to 1,700 excess deaths. 2021, we had 5,000 plus. 22, 5,000 plus, 23, 5,000 plus, and 24, 5,000 plus. Now, what happened that caused so many excess deaths in this country? That's what we have to investigate.
Yeah. And so you've been shut down. You did have a little bit of support down there. There was one or two councillors that came on board with you. Do you want to talk about that part of the experience? It's not all negative.
Yeah, well, Councillor William O'Leary seconded my motion, which is very, very important, because if you don't have a seconder for a motion, then you can't speak about the motion. And I want to commend Councillor William O'Leary, because he was put under immense pressure. When he said that he was going to second my motion, the pressure he was put under to change his mind was immense. And he stuck to his guns and he said, no, I want to second Cllr O'Donoghue's motion. And he did, and I appreciate that very much, because if that didn't happen, we wouldn't have been able to have the conversation on Monday. And Councillor Buckley as well, he supported me. But out of 55 councillors, these were the only three: myself, O'Leary, and Buckley, who supported the motion.
But they didn't even shoot it down just with a no vote. They did their own typical Irish smart Irish political dancing around the bush. So what they did was to put an amendment down. And that amendment was that they wouldn't do anything until after the COVID inquiry. And they said that you were preempting this COVID inquiry. But in reality, if they're at the point, they're at the design phase of a national COVID inquiry, it's the exact perfect right time for your local authority to contact them, to encourage that inquiry, but also maybe to help define the parameters of that inquiry as well. So it seems to me that their excuse that you are preempting, it just doesn't wash. It's just not rational or logical. So they put this amendment down, and they also, I think, they ignored the excess debts thing altogether, I think, in the response. What did you think about the pettiness of the response, this idea of putting an amendment down so it doesn't look like they voted against it per se?
Oh, it was a big eye opener for me personally. So I had my motion down. There was obviously disagreement with the motion. So I said, okay, if there's disagreement, let's put it to a vote. And there was massive resistance they did not want to vote. They did not want to vote on my motion. And I insisted, look, if we're not going to agree on it, we have a vote. So then, after much toing and froing, Councillor Patrick Mulcahy, he proposed an amendment, which was seconded by Councillor Mary Lynn Foley, basically that we would stall any, we wouldn't even speak about COVID until after the inquiry basically takes place, which obviously is 5 years gone now and still no inquiry. When this inquiry will actually take place, we don't know. And obviously it's not going to be a transparent, public and independent inquiry. So I never agreed to that amendment. It was agreed by okay, we'll have the vote. So the vote was had on the amendment, and that amendment was passed with only myself, Councillor Buckley and Councillor O'Leary voting against it. And then as a result, there was no vote allowed on my motion, according to standing orders. So I expressed my dismay at that. I said, look, that highlights how democratic this country is. And I finished off by saying, at least my conscience is clear.
Okay. So, although that's an end to that motion, that specific motion, you are asking people, constituents around the country, to get on to their local councillors to have similar motions put down, in the hope that this will, at a national level, at least be registered that councils around the country have either supported or have rejected proper independent inquiries. And most importantly, in terms of the current ongoing crisis in excess debts, to investigate the excess debts more than anything else at the moment, I think, to try to put a stop to that. So you are asking people to do that. How would they go about that? To just literally sending an email to their local councillors?
Yeah, that's something that I would be encouraging. Look, it's a taboo subject. You're not allowed to talk about this, Finbar. You know, these people that are passing away, you're not allowed to mention it, you're not allowed to talk about it. So while the inquiry would be into the COVID restrictions in the past, this is an actual issue that is currently ongoing. So if we did have an inquiry or an investigation very rapidly, we possibly could save many lives in the near future. So what I would be saying is that for people all around Ireland, obviously this excess debt issue is not just confined to Cork. It's the whole entire of Ireland. It's happening. I would be urging people to approach councillors within their county councils and city councils, and asking them to put forward a similar motion to their council. So look, we have the taboo is broken in Cork now. We've spoken about it, and I would ask the other councils to speak about it as well, and hopefully there will be more success within other councils across the country.
There's something very distasteful, isn't there, Peter, about the idea of locally elected councillors going to funerals, particularly of young people, and knowing that this death is the second young person's funeral this week, and that there's 2 a week I have to go to now, compared to prior to COVID when there was 1 every 6 months. But doing this, shaking hands with family, saying, "Oh, I'm very sorry about your son or your daughter," and knowing that there's something not right about this, but refusing to take the simple action of voting to have a letter sent that might help deal and put an end to this, or find out why this is happening to these families. And they're not willing to do that, but they're willing to go and shake the hands and nod the head and get the vote by turning up to the funeral. There's something particularly distasteful about that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's quite shocking actually, Finbar. Like, we weren't proposing something major. I was proposing was that we would send a letter to the Taoiseach just asking for an investigation. And the big question here is, why was there such opposition to that simple request? Why do our councillors in County Cork not want that issue investigated? Why do they want it hidden under the carpet? That is the big question here. And I would think many people know the answer to that question already.
Okay. Peter, I know that you're a bit like a badger. When you get stuck onto somebody's leg, you're not going to let go. So you're not going to let go of this leg either. If people want to contact you, want to follow you, you're available on Facebook, I presume. I'm not sure if you're on X and the other things. What's the best way to follow you and to contact you?
Well, I have a Facebook page, yeah, Peter O'Donoghue. that's just Peter O'Donoghue from County Cork, really. I'm not on Twitter or really, no, so just Facebook would be probably the best method.
Okay. We're going to have to spread you out a bit further than that. Now we're going to have to get you onto X and stuff like that, Peter, if we're going to get the message across. Listen, Peter, thanks a million for joining us. You'll join us hopefully in a few weeks again as things develop in this area. I know you're involved in a multitude of campaigns. You're based in North Cork, but you do a lot of stuff at a national level as well, which I think is very important. Thanks for joining us, Peter. Hopefully we'll speak to you soon.
You're very welcome, Finbar. All the best, Slán.